In 2019, we took a trip to New Zealand to visit the legendary WETA Workshop to meet the team that creates the incredible props, models, and special effects that you've definitely seen in science fiction and fantasy movies. They're tasked with turning fantasy and science fiction concepts that are written in a script into tangible, real-life objects that can be held or worn or fired or even driven. WETA has made armor, swords, costuming, creatures for Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings and Hobbit trilogies. They've also made futuristic robots, vehicles, weapons, and models for science fiction films such as Blade Runner 2049, I Am Mother, Ghost in the Shell, Mad Max, and dozens more. We wanted to know, how are these props built? How long does it take to make them? How many people have to be involved and with what skill sets? What materials and techniques do they use? What's the overall workflow? We know props are a huge factor in science fiction and fantasy movies, and creating them must take an epic level of skill and coordination. Not only do all the props have to be interpreted from the script, they have to be designed, engineered, and then constructed, painted, and finally shipped to the set on time. After wondering about these questions since we were kids, we decided we weren't going to wait any longer, and we packed up our gear and we went to WETA in person. I likes mine raw. Right? First, the script concepts are worked up into stunning 2D artwork on screen or paper. But the magic really happens when the different WETA Workshop departments turn these images into reality with an ingenious blend of engineering, 3D design, sculpting, modeling, molding, animatronics, and even old-school swordsmithing. And then they add the final touches in their brilliant painting department. It's not just work for the silver screen, though. WETA Workshop also creates an array of beautiful and meticulously crafted collectible figures and weapons. They have an incredible eye for detail. As lifetime fans of science fiction, going to WETA in person was amazing, particularly because we spent so many hours together as kids back in the day making and painting our own models and figures. We know how hard it is, and these guys take that to the max. What we love is how they combine a visionary, fantastical creativity with practical hard science and precision engineering. We got the lowdown on how it's done on an industrial scale by the world's very best special effects and modeling craftsmen and women. To get a sense of how the whole process unfolds when a new project is taken on, we sat down with Ben Wooten. He's a senior designer and project lead.
The first thing we get is usually a brief, and if it's a bigger project we may get the script to read, or we may get a treatment, and we may get a breakdown on the elements within the movie or the TV series that we're going to be designing into. Defining a brief and understanding the brief is so much of the work is done immediately. You also want to have a design freedom early on that isn't too restrained by how it's going to be realized. That's going to be really important as you go down the line in the process, but you don't want to start putting those sort of restraints on people too early because it can really stifle that design process.
Typically, when a costume or prop is ordered, WETA will supply a hero version, the most detailed and highly finished version, ideal for lingering close-ups, and also a stunt version, designed for action sequences, allowing more flexibility and greater movement for performers. Supplying props and the key robot costume for the science fiction film I Am Mother was a recent undertaking at WETA. The man tasked with delivering the client's needs was Luke Hawker.
The filmmaker will come to me with a script, come to WETA actually with a script, and then it gets handed to me to go, okay, here's the costume, the props, or the weapons that need to go on set. Majority of the time we'll get a script and we'll look at it and we'll go, okay, you've ordered one hero suit and one stunt suit. I've read your script, you need 4 stunt suits. And you're going to need 2 hero ones. That's because we want it to look the best on set. And we'll also talk about breakaways where it's like you've ordered 4 stunts, but you don't. You need maybe just 2 stunts of this item and 1 hero. And so it's a feedback session for us because we ultimately love to take the things on set because we love to get involved in the filmmaking, but also carry it all the way through and make sure it looks right. We're experts in the field. We've been in the industry for almost 3 decades now.
With the budget and details of the client's shopping list agreed upon, the 2D concept artists can get to work and really let their creative juices flow. Once the concept artists have worked up some beautiful images and designs, these need to be turned into a physical object. It's always the role of WETA to apply practical and budgetary considerations to the ambitious, fanciful wishes of the directors, scriptwriters, and producers. Remember the original stormtroopers in the first Star Wars movie? They could barely move around without bumping into things. It's no good having amazing costumes if the performers can't see out of it, or can't move convincingly, or can't fight or ride a horse, or whatever the script calls for. To avoid these kinds of issues, the WETA teams are always thinking ahead and applying practical, creative problem solving to their designs.
You now need to talk to the director, talk to the concept artists, and start turning it from what's on a page or a 2D illustration into an actual object on set.
Some things are a lot more simple than others, like a simple weapon has very little functionality issues with it, whereas a suit of armour has a lot of functionality issues with it.
If we need to undertake building a costume, what generally happens is between design and the design department and the 3D department, we usually start talking quite early about how the design is going to be appropriated into, well, how is it going to be manufactured.
This is James Doyle. He's the head of WETA's 3D department.
A lot of the time when people are designing something, they're not necessarily thinking about if an arm moves up at a certain angle, how is a pauldron going to be interacting with the neck cowl or something. So we have to have a lot of those discussions first.
If I were a producer and I had the money backing me up and I'm really into this project that I'm doing, I would imagine that I would be like, I just want it to look cool.
Yeah.
And I'm not worrying about people wearing costuming and the practicality.
Some people are really into it, some people are receptive to it, some people come around and understand it and get involved with it, and some don't. And that's personal taste. That's why we play different games or watch different films. We have different aesthetics and different likes and desires.
Once that has got to a point where the design is kind of fleshed out, then we might start building in 3D just a mock-up to see how forms and proportions are going to be working. Because things can be difficult to see in 3D, but it's very easy to iterate things in 3D. What we tend to do is do rapid prototyping. We use FDM printing for rapid prototyping. It's quick and cheap. We can output something quickly and grind a bit off, if it's colliding with something, and then re-digitize that piece and then kind of start that process again.
FDM 3D printing builds an object by heating the plastic material and precisely apply it layer by layer. It's a great tool because it can print complex, highly detailed shapes. You end up with something that's strong, durable, and in most cases, it's much faster than hand creating the object. WETA uses one of the largest FDM 3D printers available, and it enables them to make large-scale objects fast and at a low cost. WETA's creative director, co-founder, and CEO Richard Taylor said that FDM printing has transformed the way they work and it's supercharged the company's output. Who do you report to, and who's the person that says, oh, no, this isn't right, the producer doesn't want that, or give me a little bit of insight into that process.
If we're working with the design department, then there will be an art director like Ben or one of the art leads that we generally will defer to in that process. What we're doing, the 3D department, during that time is helping to facilitate what is going to end up on the manufacture floor.
So how much do you guys get involved? Is there a really clean break between design and the 3D manufacturer, or do you guys say, in the iterative process of realizing the design concept in 3 dimensions, do you also tweak the design purely for aesthetic things, or are you guys just executing what the design department is telling you?
It's an ongoing conversation, and we really try not to change the design because at that stage, generally, a director has locked off a design. But sometimes, if a design doesn't work for manufacture, then it may warrant tweaking the design to kind of fit a manufacture pipeline. Some things just can't be built.
Design is not illustration, and this is a massive thing, I think, that people misconception. If you lose track of the fact that you're designing for a final product and that what you're doing in front of you is not the final product, then you're going to get into a world of trouble later on, because that tire's going to hit the road and that actor's going to be uncomfortable in that armour and his performance is going to be degraded for that, and they're going to be cutting into your design on set to make it work for him.
In the case of I Am Mother, the project supervisor, Luke Hawker, was also going to be the performer inside the robot suit. It had to be designed to fit his body perfectly.
You were the mother.
I was the mother, yes. I was mother for a few weeks, yeah.
How was it?
It was a really awesome opportunity, a really awesome thing. I'm a great sci-fi fan. I'm a fan of like RoboCop, Star Wars, Terminator, all those films. And so when the project came to us, I was pretty excited. So this here is the stunt head. So this was the parts where basically we've got, there was only one suit for the whole film. And that was apart from the head, there were two heads. And then there were two sets of feet. I had heels on, aluminium heels. And then I had some stunt kind of foam ones to raise me up to the same level. And then a couple of sets of hand. But this is the stunt head.
Can we see inside it?
Yeah, so inside it, you've got basically a big cavity for my big noggin. And this here is like an ABS sort of blumper. And that's the only thing you can see looks like an organic shape. And that's built off my skull cap. And so that's like a kind of a negative sort of section. And the whole idea of this was to raise the head slightly higher than my head and then have the pivot point down here and then put negative space in here. So when I'm moving and doing this, it's pivoting in a much larger axis than a human head would. And elongating the face also changed the way that the head was being, kind of perceived. And like there's a section here, in fact, this bit's coming off. But right in there, you can see that hole in there. That's actually my ear. That's how tight we were getting it. Every layer we were going, well, how tight can we get this? And we got it so tight that actually without this there, my ear would be popping through.
Wow. Yeah. So that's designed for your head.
Only my head. And in fact, they had to, when they put me on, they actually have to squeeze it open. Like there's a back section I can't show you that comes off here, but that hole, those 4 bolts come away. And when they put it on me, they literally squeeze it open and then I shove my head in. And then get put up like that.
All to get away from the idea of a man in a suit, right?
Yes.
It's a critical thing for these types of stuff.
And that was all about changing like my physiology by making the shoulders really wide, making the waist really, really small, elongating the legs to just kind of change it up so that when you see the robot moving, you can't pick where the human is. You kind of go, the knee's not really, okay. And like the shoulders... Excellent. The shoulders were like way out here so that when I moved, my arms are like this, but it looks like she's standing straight. So sci-fi for me is an old love. And then so building something like this, and I remember there was a point we were building a suit and we're thinking like, what are we comparing ourselves to? Oh, C-3PO, RoboCop. And there was this sinking feeling of sickness of, that's a huge thing to do. That's a massive shoes to fill. Christian Pierce was a concept designer who designed the concept. And then through a massive team at WETA, once we got the concept design over the line, it then came into our 3D department and we started looking at it. But before it gets even to the 3D department, there's a thing called black foam, which is like a cosplay, like foam sort of thing. And we get a one-to-one print out of the costume, of the concept. We get a print out of like a mannequin of me, and then Bryce Curtis will start actually carving it in foam, black foam, to make a low-res version of the robot. That gets scanned in the computer, and then we rebuild it in the computer.
Oh, wow.
And we've worked out that process way back from, we did Spectral way back when, and we've done other projects where basically it's a cosplay to get the shape and the forms and get everything moving right. Then we scan it, digitize it, and then start printing it out. And it's a massive group effort.
All that happens just to create a single suit. When multiple versions of an item need to be produced, such as enough swords to equip an army of orcs, then the molding department springs into action. They'll make molds from an original model and then cast as many replicas as are needed. Rob Skine from the molding department took us through the process.
We basically create the tool which allows us to mass produce these items, and then they go on and get painted and finished before going to set.
So as far as in the workflow of the way that WETA works, you're later in the process.
No, we're actually sort of earlier, or in the middle, really.
Okay.
So it sort of goes from 3D department through to props, and then comes to us, and we mould it, and then it goes on to casting and paint and costume after that. For a film production, it wouldn't be uncommon for us to make 20 plus swords of one particular description, sometimes as many as a couple hundred, depending on the film. And like if it's an infantry sword, we'd make a lot more than if it's the sword that belongs to one of the hero characters. The final swords get made out of a urethane called CC60 that we use, which is a very durable plastic, effectively. And primarily we make our moulds out of silicon that captures detail really nicely and creates a flexible skin that we can demold out of, but sometimes we also use fiberglass and plaster and other materials like that to produce the mold itself.
Creating the swords for Rob and his team to model is WETA's resident master swordsmith, Peter Lyons.
Hey, Peter.
Hi.
We noticed that you were creating. It looks like a piece of the pommel for Orchrist. Is that correct?
This here is actually the handguard for Orchrist, so it's an unusual one, and this one is cast steel.
Can I hold it?
Sure. Yeah, it's quite a lump of steel.
I mean, that is a heavy piece right there.
Yeah. Well, Orchrist was a big sword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's as close as you'll get to the originals. The only difference is that they're better.
Yeah.
So by doing small production runs, I'm able to actually just keep refining my processes and possibly make them better than the originals. The swords that I make are generally the hero sword is used to make a mold, and that mold is then used for the reproductions and urethane swords. So you'll often start with a steel sword for the hero shots, so those are kept consistent, so you don't have, say, a sword getting chewed up in combat. And then you have stunt swords, which are an aluminium blade with a urethane hilt, and usually that hilt is molded straight off the hero sword. This is actually one of the things I'm most proud of, even though you never see it in a movie, is because all of these flanges are cut and ground out of aluminium, welded onto this middle lump, then it's all etched, and then these are built, those are built up, that's built up, so there's a lot of things going on there from a construction viewpoint.
That is absolutely a masterpiece.
So that was going to be the hero prop for Sauron, and then Peter Jackson decided he wanted it bigger and bigger.
Oh, bigger than this?
Yes, so we took parts of the scaled up version of that, and it became the new hero mace. So
Look at that.
That mace that had so much work and money put into it became redundant.
Many props don't necessarily need to be functional. For example, a laser gun can be made to look like it's firing using some clever CGI in post-production. However, many of WETA's creations do need at least some or even total functionality on set. This is where the engineering department takes over. At their head is Joel Ahi Drought.
Do a lot of the things that you make, like they're not necessarily real, right? They don't have to work in real life, but they have to look like they work on camera. So like,
yeah,
how do you do it? So you're approximating a working item, is it a weapon?
That's exactly right. We did like a flintlock sort of a pistol recently. When we were first presented with it, we're like, well, can we make this practically? Can we have it, things move and the hammer click? And yeah, often we are making things look like they work. We do a lot of weapons, as I'm sure you guys know, which is pretty basic. That's just sort of steel work or aluminium. We do like reciprocating gun mechanisms. We do vehicles when possible. We'd like to do some more vehicles, if anyone's out there. We do like animatronic mechanisms and puppeteering stuff. So we might do the mechanics of the thing. And sometimes we're involved in the automation, but usually once we're done with a mechanical build, that'll go to the animatronics guys for automation, which is
to add more functionality to it.
Yeah, or like so they will add the actuators for remote control, let's say. So we'd maybe figure out the way that it should move or work, and they'll come along and go, okay, cool, this is how we should make that move. And
do the designers ever ask you to do something that you can't do, and you have to say, listen, what you're asking for is just not physically possible, you have to revise it in some way?
Yeah, absolutely, they do.
Can you give us an example?
Laws of physics,
yeah, well, it's a testament to everybody that works in this building. You don't often hear the word no around here. That's kind of not the point, if you know what I mean. Sometimes you will, but we'll often exhaust so many paths trying to hit that mark before we actually go, well, shit, man, we didn't get it done, sorry, but maybe we could make it look like polished aluminium. Yeah, great. It's good. It's a good working environment.
This is glamdring, which is obviously something from early on in my career.
That's Gandalf's sword.
This is Gandalf's sword. Now, we wanted something which was slightly unusual and slightly elegant, so it has this soft leafing of the blade. This is about exactly the same proportions as Strider's sword. Same length, same handle, and this, it's only a 3mm leafing on this widest part here that makes this sword really unwieldy compared to Strider's sword, which does not have this leafing. And you go, if I was actually going to design a sword to fight with, it would not be that, because you can feel that tip dragging down.
Right.
And it's like, you make those concessions sometimes, but you're aware of them, the rules you're breaking. You know, it's kind of interesting.
You include a fuller, which does reduce the weight of the sword, and but also makes it look like a sword. Right?
Yeah,
That's
totally. And it gives you a nice visual read in the light as well.
But guys, keep in mind, I mean, let's get real with each other. This is a magic weapon. It's not going to feel like a real sword.
No, but someone actually has to hold it and move it in real life without it being magical.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
But it is fascinating that when you start to dive into those things and you talk about functionality, and there's times, and because it is a magic sword, it is a ray gun, it is a spaceship, that reality gets pushed aside for the film thing. But it's really nice to bring as much reality in as often as possible, because that's what gives it a good anchoring for the audience.
So far, we've learned that WETA examines the script or treatment to create a props list. They discuss the details of the desired props with the director or appropriate person or team. Then they draw prototype designs that are iterated until the designs are accepted. If needed, they could then further refine the design using 3D printing. They may need to conduct testing to ensure the prop meets all requirements. Once they lock in the prop's final form, they can now move on to create the actual prop. Depending on what the prop is, it can land in one of many departments. At this point, they can make molds of the prop if multiples are needed. Finally, the props are ready for the last stage in the WETA process that brings the props to life. Meet Jules German. How close to the end is
very, very close to the end. Usually, again, it depends. Usually the paint department's right at the end of the process. So all of the other work gets done, and sometimes we're called the finishing department, because we'll finish it off. Again, it's dependent, like a sword or armour, after we've painted it, will go to the costume department and they'll wrap it up in leather or what have you. But I mean, even then, it will usually come back to us, and we'll what's called break it down and put mud and do an age pass on it.
One of the things that I heard that you're particularly good at, you're good at making things look first real, but like as an example, I want this to look like metal, and you're painting a non-metal thing, and you're trying to match it, or aging, or wear and tear. Like, where did that skill come from? Is this all trial and error, or is there a place to go to learn how to do that?
For me, trial and error, and then I just grew up painting models and interested in science fiction, fantasy. So, you know, same as every other kid. So trial and error.
Cool kids, anyway. Right? Yeah, cool kids.
So this is all painted. So it comes out like the inside of it's green. This is all painted. And that was actually another thing that was quite difficult, is you've got these aluminium sort of roll cage, which is just urethane. But then you have the aluminium sections that are on the suit that also need to look like, you know, they're aluminium as well. So we've got real aluminium, sintered nylon, which is actually printed straight from the printer. A lot of the suit was made out of sintered nylon because it was a one-off. And then you've got urethane bits. So the paint team has to do a lot to try and bring it all together. And then we put our WETA grime over everywhere. You can see there's nice WETA grime going in there, which always makes things look right.
With such a talent and passion for their work, it's no surprise that the folks at WETA really are known the world over. The knowledge and skills of the various teams are now being recorded for future generations of artists and creators. And I had some advice on what they might call this WETA Bible.
Coming to WETA Workshop, you're surrounded by like minds, and there's a whole building full of experience. So there was quite a quick learning curve too, just by being exposed. In a concentrated area, the exposure became a lot higher. So I learned a lot of tricks coming here.
There's a lot of institutional memory at WETA.
Absolutely, yeah. And we try, as an organisation, we're trying to record that information.
You need something called Wetapedia.
Yeah. We're actually working like that. Is a good name though. Yeah.
We sometimes, you have to take a step back from what you're doing and realize, what do we do for a living? It's so much fun, you know. We get, we've just got so much opportunity to try so many different things. You know, and someone who's into mechanical engineering, like some of the guys my age who are doing it, haven't got the breadth of work that I have purely because I'm allowed so much opportunities, you know. And it's cool, yeah.
Something that is really specific to WETA, I think, is the last 10% of our suits and our costumes and our props is 90% of the whole build. And we all get around it and we look at it and we assess it and we go, okay, what here is working and what isn't? And Richard Taylor and Rob Gillies are usually the first to bring that thing out and go, that doesn't work there. And you're like, this could have gone on a plane tomorrow. And you know, and
well, you're going to be pulling all-nighter.
Yeah, and you're going to sleep on the plane because you're going to be here all night, but it's totally worth it.